Most business owners don't realize that they're actually building the most valuable asset they'll ever own. Let me show you how to turn that into your dream payday. What if I told you that your dream payday is closer than you think, and that the numbers you need to know to get there are already hidden inside your business? Every dream exit comes down to one simple formula: profit times multiple. And if you understand it, you can easily reverse engineer what your business is worth. Running a business without an exit plan is like going for a drive without a destination in mind. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set your target and map the pathway to get there. So for many business owners, we know, I've talked about this a lot already as well, in terms of what it looks like when we're growing and scaling our business. Profitability over time does not grow as a lovely straight line. You know, growth is not a perfect linear journey in business. But if we're growing and scaling a business, it is trending up over time, but it's full of many ups and downs. You know, you can liken this to something like the weather moving into winter or summer. There's a clear overall trend, but on a day-to-day basis, there's highs and lows along the way. And we can zoom out and we can see what this looks like for your business. We refer to this as the peaks and valleys as we're growing and scaling our business. Now, for many business owners, particularly if you were just a startup and you started your business yourself, or maybe you acquired a business but it was in a small place, you know, you're down here and you're starting at kind of the zero territory. And over the last however long you've been in business, you might have been able to build your business up to a point where it's like, let's say, $1 million business. You've gone through this slog of the journey, and we tend to be, or many business owners tend to be quite short-sighted in terms of what they've built and where they've got to, and they're not taking this bigger macro perspective of, you know, what could potentially happen in my business over the next 5 years? What could I be aiming for? And within my program or methods about what I teach people, the CFO system, one of the key tools, the fourth tool, is that 5-year forecast model, which is built on understanding how my business has been performing so far, but using that same information and data to be able to project the business longer term and actually see, based on how we're performing so far, where are we heading over the next 5 years? And one that's really interesting and motivating for you to see the bigger picture for your business, what it is that you're actually building. You know, that can be really great for you in terms of what that's going to mean for you and your family over the next 5 years, what kind of legacy you're actually building out of this business. But it gets really exciting when we start talking about a potential exit for your business and what that would actually look like. And the exit doesn't necessarily have to mean I sold my business. It could just mean I've exited myself from day-to-day running the business or put it under leadership. An exit can mean many different things for many different people, but I guess I'm largely focusing on the potential of an actual payday here in terms of a payday exit, selling your business. And when we start to look at this bigger picture journey and think about what an exit could actually mean for you, that can be so empowering and motivating for you as a business owner. You know, seeing the numbers mapped out from not only, you know, how has my business performed so far and where we've got to, but seeing the trajectory of that in terms of the numbers. And then when we start talking exit, i.e. you're going to get paid a multiple of the profits at that point in time, what that actually means for you, incredibly powerful. And that's really what I want to touch on today, is understanding the mechanics of selling a business, of exiting it, so that we can see which numbers do what for us and why, even when we come all the way back to today, why it's really important to have one eye on that future and what it's actually worth to us, so that we're making sure we're shaping the business, not only in terms of profitability, but in terms of the type of business we're building, to best set ourselves up for that dream payday exit. I guess to understand this slide, you need to understand the two key numbers that drive an exit. So when we talk about an exit in terms of like a payday exit, selling your business for money, you know, you're going to get paid dollars for that business. It's built around, that exit valuation is built around two separate numbers that we need to understand. First of all, there's the profit that we're making every year in the business, because somebody who's buying your businesses is buying it for the profit it's producing. So obviously, understanding profitability and being able to build a bigger profit is going to ultimately result in a bigger payday for you at exit. But then there's a second piece of the puzzle as well, which is what we refer to as the multiple, which essentially means how many times of that profit is someone going to pay you for it. For example, if we have a business here that's making $100,000 a year and someone pays you a 3 times multiple for it, you're going to get paid $300K for that business. So there's two key numbers that matter: the profits that you're generating and the multiple that you're going to get paid for your exit. So appreciating that there's those just two simple numbers, we can put it into a really basic 2x2 matrix to see where you are in terms of exit readiness for your business or what you're actually building. So I've got this simple 2x2 matrix here where we can look at, you're either making low profits or you're making high profits. And in terms of a multiple, is your business well placed to get to attract a high multiple in the sale, or are you going to get a low multiple? And just doing this simple 2x2 here, if we have low profits and low multiple, obviously you're going to have a really low multiple. You're going to have a really low exit value. You haven't got much profit, you haven't got much multiple, you're not going to end up with much. If we move ourselves up into the high profit category, but have a low multiple, again, we might have a cash-rich, highly profitable business, but you're not going to get paid very much for it because the business isn't very attractive from a multiple perspective. Inversely, over the other side here, you might have a really great business in terms of systems and structures and people and under management, and that's great, but if we've got no profits or low profits there's not much profit, coming into this exit payday formula. And so a great multiple times low profit is going to result in a low exit. Where we actually want to be, up here when we're having an exit, which is where we've got a business generating high profits, we're getting paid a high multiple for it because the business is well structured, ready for an exit. This is where you get a premium exit, a dream payday for your business. So it's absolutely smashing both of these two variables that adds into it. So,
sorry if I missed it, but how does the variable get, the multiplier, how does the multiplier get determined?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can touch on profit again in a moment, but profit's obviously my jam in terms of how do we be really intentional about making profit. We can talk to that in a moment. But if we just focus on the multiplier side of things here, as a part of this equation, what the multiple actually represents at the end of the day is basically risk or return on investment that somebody's get when they invest in your business. So typical small business in Australia will sell basically for a multiple of 3 times. It's kind of like this typical kind of starting place where people want to value a small business for an exit. If it's high risk business, not very well structured, not very well set up, you might only get a 2 times multiple or a 1 times multiple. If you have a really strong business in terms of, I'll list a bunch of criteria in a second that actually will explain the multiple, but you have a business under management, strong leadership team in a great growing market, proof of results, consistency of results. These are the kind of things that are going to make your business less risky and you'll attract a higher multiple for sale. Now, another way of looking at this multiple is it essentially represents how many years is it going to take for somebody to get the payback of the money they've invested into the business. So again, let's go back to the example of a business doing 100K. If it's got a 3 times multiple, someone is going to pay 300K to buy that business. Whereas if the business is under management, really consistent, great contracts in place, continuity of revenue for many years, and you say attract a 5 times multiple, someone is going to pay 500K, i.e. $100,000 times 5 for that business instead. So what we can see here is someone's paying a higher dollar value for the same amount of profit because of the multiple factor. And so that multiple essentially represents risk or how long somebody's prepared to wait to get their return on investment. So another way of looking at it is you could look at it as a 3x multiple as like a 33% return on investment. They're going to get paid back over 3 years, i.e. 33% for 3 years in a row to get all their money back. Whereas if someone pays a 5 times multiple, that's a 20% return on investment. It's going to take somebody 5 years to get all their money back. Why would somebody pay 5 times instead of 3 times? It's because they believe it's a safer bet, a more consistent business. They're happy to wait longer to get it back because they believe in that business. It's less risky. So this is where the multiple is essentially a factor of risk or how long somebody's prepared to wait to get a return on investment. So if you want a higher multiple, to attract a higher multiple in your business, the key things that drive the multiple are down here. Like I said, is the business under management? Is the owner completely independent of it? If you own that business, can you go on holidays for a month or 2 and come back and the business is in a better place than when you left it? Because there's a great independency of you who's running the business. That's what we kind of refer to as a turnkey operation or a business which is just an established system that's generating cash without the owner actually doing anything. That is definitely the most attractive business for somebody who wants to buy, because you can literally buy that as a proper outside investor. And ironically, it's the business you don't want to sell, because it's the business which is just under management and generating profits for you. That's why a business like that is the one that's going to attract the premium multiples, the highest multiple. Other factors that come into here: do we have great systems and processes in place that are going to continue to grow and scale with the business? Is there a really strong leadership team in there? Continuity of leadership. They're clearly bought into the business and structured in a way that they're going to be there from one owner to the next and for the long term of that business. We're not going to have a change of ownership and therefore half the management team leave, and that's going to cause chaos to that business. Does the business have great track record in terms of its financials? Recurring and predictable revenue. The revenue isn't tied. It's a really high risk to just one key client or contract, which could get switched off and that business essentially lose all its work. Is the revenue that the business is generating under contracts, and more importantly, long-term contracts that are going to outlive a change of ownership and go on for a long time? Does the business have great brand strength, a great market position? Is it a market that's growing? Right now, would it be an agency that's in like an AI kind of tech space, which looks really exciting for the future? Or is it selling DVDs or something which is, in a process of massive decline? These kind of external market factors also shape it. And so these are all the kind of factors that build into, does this business look high risk, or is there great certainty around this business? And these are the things that on one side are really driving the multiple side of the business equation, of this exit equation. So that's the multiple side of the equation. Let's come back to talking about the profit side of the equation. And this is obviously my jam. I love talking about how to be really intentional about making the profit that you want to see out of your business. And back to my simple analogy here. We gave before an example of if a business has 100K profit, and we had 3 different levels of multiples being made. On the flip side, let's just say we're being consistent about what multiple we're choosing. Let's put a 3 times multiple here. But if we have a business which is making 100K or 150K or say 200K, even with just keeping the multiple consistent at a 3 times multiple, you're going to end up with 300,000, 450,000 or 600,000 in terms of the payday there. So you can see how important it is to make sure you're absolutely maximizing the profit in your financials in the business that you're going to sell as well when you want to have a dream payday over here. Obviously, these 2 parts of this equation are of real equal importance in terms of which one is going to result in more profit, or like I explained in this matrix earlier, essentially you want both. You want high profits and a business in a really great, strong position to attract a high multiple. Now, I've talked fairly extensively about this in lots of my other videos, but for me, when it comes to profitability, we can be really intentional about making profit in our business. And at a real basic sense, like, what is profit? Profit is just the outcome when you as the business owner manage number 1 and 2 really well, i.e. the income and expenses. You can't just go make profit. What you can do is control or make the right decisions around the income and the expenses, the 2 elements of the equation that live in front of profit. And obviously your goal is to make sure you have more income, less expenses, and create a little surplus there. And it's that surplus that is what profit is for you. And so if we want more profit, we obviously need to have either higher income or lower expenses to create this surplus. What I love to teach people though is, obviously you can't just look at your business as just income and expenses. You can, but to be more effective at a commercial level, we need to go a layer or 2 deeper. And this is where we get down to my, what I refer to as the profit formula layer. And this is where I love to look at any business, just these same 7 numbers for any business, because first of all, not only do they explain for me clearly how a business is making profit, and I'll just touch on what they are. We want to split income into the prices that we're charging and the number of customers that we're doing. So we want to see these 2 key levers that drive income. You want more income, you can either charge higher prices or have more customers. And there's a multitude of business strategies you can pursue around either of those, but at the end of the day, it basically boils down to price and volume as the 2 key drivers. And then when I look at the expense side of a business, I always like to look to start with at this high level of just 5 key categories for expenses. I call them the business drivers, profit drivers. We're talking the cost of goods sold. These are the direct costs of the things you're selling, i.e. if you're a restaurant, it's the beer and the food you're selling. If you're a builder, it's the cost of the materials and supplies and subbies to build a house. We've got our team cost. This is the people cost in your business, the people who are working for you in the team. There's a multitude of things that make that up, not just their salary, but also the workers' compensation insurance, the superannuation, the contractors, all the stuff that essentially creates your team. We've got marketing and growth. What are we investing in our business to grow this business? We've got property. If you're a bricks and mortar business, really important to understand your property or your rent expense and really like what is the capacity that we're going to get out of our site. And then finally is overheads. And this overheads is like the catch-all bucket, which if something doesn't land in numbers 1 to 4 in front of it, it's going to end in this bucket over here. Anything that doesn't land in 1 to 4, just group it into that overheads bucket. And so yeah, I look up some of my other videos. I talk extensively about this profit formula and why this is the level that you should be looking at your numbers. So it's very high level compared to the usual P&Ls that people look at, but it's definitely a level down than just income and expenses. So we can see what the key drivers are within your business. It's these 7 numbers: price, volume, and then these 5 different types of expenses. This is the level I love to look at any business when it comes to profitability. And now it's knowing these 7 numbers when it comes to the profit side of your business, which first of all enables us to clearly see what's driving your business. You know, in most businesses, not all 7 numbers are really relevant. And in particular, there'll be some of the numbers where you just can't change, like the rent, you're just locked into a long-term contract, the overheads or whatever they are. And it's looking at your profit under this profit formula light, where you can actually clearly see which numbers can I change and which ones can't I change. And then from there, as a busy business owner with not much time and not much financial resource or time resource, we can clearly see which one of those areas should I be focusing on that's going to move the needle for me in terms of profitability. So yeah, I've gone into my love of profit and how to make profit here, but it's understanding the profit formula for your business. Now, bringing this back to what we're talking about today with the exit side of things, in particular when we're focusing on a dream payday exit, we can be really clear and intentional about what the financial results need to look like in terms of the different components of the business to be able to achieve the profits I want for an ideal payday. For example, working with a client of mine, his name's Mark. He's a painter, but in a big industrial type painting business. And he's actually got a big business. He's doing quite well. He's generating $1 million worth of profit a year from his business. But when we were talking about what's his ideal dream payday look like, he wants to get himself up to $4 million in 5 years before he goes into the exit conversation. And now, knowing that, we're able to look at his numbers now and say, look, you're currently making $1 million profit a year. And we can break that down in terms of what prices he's charging by how many jobs he's doing. We can look at what his direct cost of sales are and what his team cost is per year and how much he's spending on marketing and overheads and stuff for his business. But we're also able to be really intentional and see, well, if we want to be making $4 million profit a year, what is that going to look like? You know, we might be able to get a small increase in the prices he's charging, but we obviously need to have a lot more jobs coming through to drive that business. And we're able to scale up, like the costs are probably going to stay the same, but his team costs are absolutely going to grow and scale with him, as will his marketing. And we can see his property and overheads probably aren't going to change too much. But the key point is we're able to see what his profit looks like now and what his profit will look like in his business when it's had a dream payday. And now his job over the next 5 years, he can be really clear about, well, how do I grow and scale these 2 components of my business to be able to get to the results I want to see, which is ultimately going to lead me to the dream payday that I'm looking for out of my business. So we're able to make clear financial plans to grow and scale the profitability of his business, while at the same time, back to what we were talking about earlier with the multiple, he's clearly able to see which parts of his business he needs to improve and put the right things in place in terms of clear management teams and client contracts and putting the business further under management without him. He can see exactly the parts he needs to work on from that side of the business over this 5-year journey as well to really set his business up for that perfect payday that he's after.